Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I am Adam Pawadic, sitting here with a special stand-in guest co-host, Rolly from Informa. We are, of course, sitting at his conference, the Western Canada Apartment Investment Conference here in Vancouver. Rolly, thanks for hosting us.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
And we do have a guest. It's not just Rolly and I talking to each other today. We have a returning guest, actually. Third performance from Goodman Commercial, second from Mark Goodman, who is a principal at Goodman Commercial, also a publisher of the Goodman Report, which has been active since 1983. And I've only been alive slightly longer than that. So this has been around for a long time. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I didn't start it. My father, David Goodman, started the report in the early 80s. And but I've been involved in the business since the early 80s. We used to sit around the dining room table and stuff the envelopes for the report and mail them out to all the apartment owners. It was the only way to get information out. I was paid 25 cents an hour, and he provided food and shelter, and I was okay with that. Moving forward now, we've obviously evolved, and Cynthia Jagger is my partner at Goodman Commercial, and we've elevated things, and we have a much larger audience, and we've moved into more of a digital way of communicating with our audience.
What year did you stop the physical production of printed reports?
Well, we actually do still physically print. I've got one
really?
in front of me right now. So we keep that going. I think now it's a bit of an anomaly to actually have a physical hard copy delivered, and we have a lot of clients who enjoy sipping their tea or coffee or bourbon, if you will, on a weekend and flipping through the pages. So we still we think it's important, and this goes out to several thousands of people by mail a few times a year.
Is it coffee and tea during good times and bourbon and bad when you're having to read the update? Or where are we right now in the bourbon to coffee scale in terms of the market?
You know, I think bourbon is appropriate at any time during the day.
True. So we'll kind of set the stage here. We are at the Apartment Investment Conference. We last had Cynthia Jagger on a year ago, so we are going to touch on that because it's been an active year. When you think about a year ago, would have been just after the interest rates started running up, and then all the fallout from that. So there's no downtime in his business. But maybe just for anybody that did not listen to your first episode, just the quick and dirty of who you are and how'd you get to where you are.
Sure. Again, my name is Mark Goodman. I'm a principal of Goodman Commercial, and we lead the company with my partner Cynthia Jagger. And we have about 25 people behind us that help assist the company. We focus in apartment sales and land primarily, although we are expanding. We have some commercial exposure as well. We're advocates for the industry. We speak, we publish. We focus on municipal land policies and how it affects our market, municipally, provincially, and federally. And we have a big chunk of market share here in Vancouver. We report on how things are going in Metro Vancouver and the apartment market. And so we've seen a lot of ups and downs over the last several years, but particularly the last year has been an anomaly for us. And I think we're out of the woods now. And from a broker's perspective, it's been challenging for our industry, but we're very optimistic, and we saw that optimism today at the conference from the panelists.
I saw your end of year. I think you had your total volume in there, and I remember thinking at the time, that's a lot for what was supposed to be a down year, or was a down year for a lot of brokers. I think you still had managed to put together a good number of deals, or maybe you had a super busy first quarter. I don't know how that would have shaken out, but what was your last year like? We'll do this as an annual update.
Sure. Well, just to give you some perspective, in 2021, we did over $500 million in sales, over 39 transactions. We were working, it was insane, 6 days a week. It was like the COVID hangover was over, and we were just redlining it. So very, very busy time. And that spilled over into 2022 for the first half. A lot of the deals that we cut in 2021 happened to close in 2022. And then things started to wobble around March 2022. We noticed things were changing. And in fact, I spoke about this at the Western Apartment Conference in Edmonton last year when I was on the stage. Cynthia was doing the podcast with you guys. And we noticed things were adjusting. We have probably over 100,000 followers across all our marketing channels. And so we tend to feel how the market's reacting and the sentiment before the majority of participants in the market do, just because of our massive exposure network. And so before any formal reporting came out, we would send out what we thought to be a really great listing at a good yield, and typically we brace ourselves for an overwhelming response, and then things started getting quieter and quieter. So we spoke about that, but we weren't quite sure how to articulate the change in the market. And then things really started slowing down with 7 or 8 unrelenting interest rate hikes. It was really something that I have never experienced in my 21 years selling real estate. But it was heavily weighted with activity in the first half, and things all but dried up for several months over the summer, leading into the fall. But we still closed 20 transactions worth $310 million. So it was still a good year. This year, we've got about $100 million, just over $100 million on the books, several transactions. And we're optimistic because finally we've got a lot of stuff happening now. Not like last year, the year before, but it's starting to improve significantly. And we've done several deals in the last month, so we can speak about that and where the market sentiment is.
I imagine the engagement you get on that social pushing and marketing of your properties is one thing. How does that relate to bidder pool on these deals?
Yeah, in terms of like the type of
depth.
profile, or
more the depth, but also the profile,
sure.
too.
Yeah, that is a really good question, because a lot of people who aren't privy to the phone calls and the activity we're getting don't really know the depth of the market. And it only takes one deal, one offer, one buyer to make the market. Even in a great market, we may have one buyer who steps up at the price our seller client wanted and makes the market. Other times it's overwhelming, and you'll have 30 tours and 15 offers all within a tight range. But to answer your question, I would say that other than one specific example with these 2 side-by-side kits buildings that Cynthia spoke to, I'd say generally it's not that we're in a poor market. I would argue that we're in a balanced market. This is almost like a normal market. The days of having lineups around the block and 40, 50 people touring over a week, that was crazy time. I think things have calmed down. But we'll have, if it's priced properly, we'll have a decent, maybe a 6 to 12 tours and a couple offers. And it's steady. But this explosiveness that we used to see is not where it was before. So I would say we're more in a balanced market. However, as Cynthia pointed out, location is everything. And we listed these 2 side-by-side buildings in Kitsilano, north of 4th, which is a prime area, water views. We had probably over 30 tours, multiple offers, 2 firm deals, different buyers. And the price is landing around $475,000 a door, give or take. The yields are hovering in the very high 3, early 4 cap rate range. Blended, it's around a 4 cap for both properties. If this was a year and a half ago, those buildings, instead of trading at $475 a door, would be trading at $575 a door, and the cap rate would be, under 3%. And so what we've seen, at least for West Side product, these older wood frame buildings where there's legacy tenants and the yields aren't the rents aren't maxed, we've seen probably a 20% drop in value for the West Side for the Kitsilano, South Granville, West End, Kerrisdale properties. But as Cynthia pointed out in her speech, and as a panelist, the newer product where you don't have legacy tenants and you're stepping into a rental apartment building where rents are at market, we've seen less of a shift in value because the yields have maintained. And we find that many buyers are very yield conscious now, and financing is very important. It's so hard to get financing in today's environment compared to before. So loan to values, generally, you're going to be 40 to 50% loan to value, but you're going to need at least a 3% cap rate to hit that. Whereas before, you could get a 50% loan to value with a 2.2 to 2.5 cap rate. So things have changed.
And the buyer stepping up to the plate, has that changed the profile?
There's this idea that only people paying the best price and stepping up to play are these institutional buyers, pension funds, REITs, and so forth. That's the furthest from the truth, actually. And of course there's this vilification of a specific segment that they're financializing, the financialization of real estate, which is nonsense. It's always been a profit model. Private buyers and institutional buyers have the same motivation. In fact, I would argue that this capitalist structure is probably the best structure in order to create affordability and to get buildings built. There has to be, and we have to incentivize people. But I regress. The type of buyers who are moving forward are more so private, well-heeled, high net worth individuals, and they make up about 90% of the market. So we did a survey, and it's in our report here somewhere, that 10 or 11% of the buyer pool was actually institutional money. And then we get into semantics when people are saying, well, what's an institutional buyer? There are some major private companies that look, act, and move forward like an institutional group.
Yeah.
And so we start getting into semantics. So private buyer is okay because they're not money hungry and they're not profit driven. They're just doing it for they're altruistic.
Like the benevolent mom and pop kind
That's
of
all.
thing. Is that
They
the
love
vision?
working for free.
Yeah.
They love sweeping, vacuuming the hallways and dealing with tenant issues. They don't need to take a profit. They just love it. They just do it for fun.
But REITs are just money hungry. And,
They're evil, Adam. They're evil. And they're all coming out of the East Coast. Actually, I have argued repeatedly that this institutional money from the REITs and the pension funds is the healthiest way for us to build rental, the most efficient way for us to get proper rental into the marketplace. They are accountable. They are transparent. They are well capitalized. They are not kicking people out on the streets. And when I saw a news release from our premier, EB, who was then, before, our housing minister, he knew very well the systemic problems we had. A lot of it revolved around our politics and shaming industry stakeholders and this false narrative. And he knew very well what the issue was, which is backlog at City Hall, red tape, the bureaucracy, very poor policies, ambiguity, not clarity on CAC. All these things were contributing to our rental crisis. Then he becomes premier, and then he makes an announcement that he's setting up policies to help solve the problem, which is international, I quote, international buyers buying up real estate and then kicking people out on the street. There's nothing further from the truth. First of all, there are no international buyers. Even before the foreign buyers tax and the foreign buyers ban, there were very few international foreign buyers. We did a survey for the Globe and Mail. We were interviewed. And out of our last 300 transactions, only 2 technically were foreign buyers. One was from Vienna, Austria, and the other one was from the United States. Everybody thinks China, China, China.
Yeah.
That's furthest. Now move forward. We got a foreign buyers ban. We got a foreign buyers tax. There are no foreign buyers. There are no international buyers. They're all Canadian.
But we solved affordability with that, didn't we?
It's all done.
That's right. We're going to keep doubling down on these failed policies, and and in all seriousness, the problem is that the developers, who I would argue are very patient, dealing with the bureaucracy provincially and municipally, have decided to actually move on, and they're moving to Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton. They're moving to the States. They're moving to the island, Victoria, Langford, where there's more business-friendly environment. And if we keep going down this path, it's just going to keep getting worse. Why would you want to invest in multifamily? Why would you want to build a rental? As Cynthia said, it could take up to 10 years to build a building. It's crazy.
I think Mark Kenny said that at the apartment conference last year. The biggest risk that he sees into the apartment industry is regulatory.
Yes.
Forget all the other headwinds that you deal with in any other asset class. Is regulatory risk is the headline item.
Well, we agree. In fact, earlier last year, we did a study. We were trying to figure out, well, first of all, we were in this unprecedented time. What's going to happen to the multifamily market? What type of trends are we going to see moving forward? And we went back to the very first Goodman report that Mr. David Goodman, my father, published, and we took every single report and we entered in all the data, because we're the only group in Canada that actually has this data, the reporting of every transaction that's ever gone forth in Metro Vancouver, and we charted it in an Excel spreadsheet. And then we laid over top different things like different policies, interest rates, bond rates, immigration, and so forth, trying to see are there specific drivers that are influencing the market. And what we realized is that the only thing that is really affecting the liquidity in the market is government intervention. So I'm actually here looking at this page here. We have, since 1988 all the way to 2022, every apartment transaction that has ever happened in Metro Vancouver. And in the highest inflationary, high interest rate environment, so 90 and 91, we were around 300 to 350 transactions a year. That is a big number for our small market. And then when the NDP came into power and started imposing rent controls and various other punitive policies, sales dropped to around 50 trades a year. And that kind of went on until the Liberals got into power in the early 2000s, when I started my career in the real estate business. And then we got back up to, a healthy 100 to 150 trades a year. And then, of course, when the NDP got back into power, we really have a difficult situation. We're faced with a very left-leaning, unfriendly business type of political climate, federally, provincially, and municipally. And of course, it's affecting our ability to get rental buildings built. And so this 35-year chart was really telling for us that it's not interest rates, it's not inflation, it's not the bond market, it is simply government intervention which really affects our market.
Well, it's funny if they call that a market distortion, but it literally is the market. Maybe it's
That's
not
right.
a market distortion.
That's right.
Maybe everything else you rhymed off there is the market distortions to an otherwise intervention-based model.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm too far up beside my own head here. So what's the good news then? This conversation's gotten
Okay, so let's talk positive.
Yeah, let's talk positive.
Demand going forward, yeah.
There are a lot of positive things about the apartment market and about our region. And so and one of the things that people ask is like, well, who's actually buying in this environment and why? And those were really good questions. So again, we actually wrote another article on buyer profile, taking our real life examples of us doing deals in a very challenging market. So we have, for example, private groups. One group, we just sold a building two buildings in South Granville. Everybody thought it was a developer because it was in the Broadway plan, but the highest and best use was actually the existing asset. Everybody thinks just because you're going to get density into the Broadway plan, you've hit a home run. It's actually not true. This group bought an office building, and they wanted to move their proceeds into a more stable, less risk-adverse asset, and they chose an apartment building in Vancouver. We have multi-generational families who have historically owned and operated buildings. They're buying for the long term, and they realize that the supply-demand imbalance that we're seeing here ain't going anywhere anytime soon. It takes years to build something. So from that standpoint, if you're a believer in Economics 101, it's a smart thing to buy an apartment building here. Rents can only go up. There's not enough supply. We've had syndicates of local owners pull their money together, and we just sold a building, a large building in Kitsilano, and it was a group of seasoned investors that came together, and on a turnover, they are renovating the unit, and they're bringing rents up from $2 a square foot to well over $4, close to $5 a square foot. And they're putting in dishwasher, stacked laundry. It's you can smell the ocean. It's very close by, and those types of areas can command big rents. So those are value add, but they're taking a longer term approach and just taking advantage of turnover. And of course, there's local developers that are also buying land to build rental. And these groups, I would argue, are very patient, and if we don't treat them well and with respect, they're going to leave and go into other jurisdictions.
Money knows no boundaries.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked a lot about all the issues that are impacting development and buyers, but going back to the affordability side, then again, you're not building enough, or not you, but the market's
Sure.
not building enough. There's hurdles that they have to cross at the municipal level, at the provincial level. There's financing issues there, and then we have a ton of new people coming into the Greater Vancouver area.
Right.
When does this? How do we get to that affordability side, and how do we deliver that?
These are really good questions, and there are a lot of smart people talking about ways to solve this issue. I believe it starts with the leadership, and I don't like the narrative we're seeing from EB's office right now, because instead of really looking at fact-based solutions, there's this narrative of vilification. And until we get rid of that and we have more insightful politics, we're going to have an issue, because a lot of people who are not privy to the challenges and the economics behind delivering rental buildings don't know otherwise. And I would say the biggest stumbling block are the politicians. They're just simply not showing the leadership that we need. You look at other cities, look at Seattle. Andrei Pavlov, who we commission every now and then to write articles for us, really puts on, he looks at fact-based solutions and looks at other cities who have moved forward. And really, as John Stavell said in a recent podcast, Real Estate Matters, I think, I can't remember what exactly it's called. He was on there with a panel, and he basically said the government needs to step out of the way. Let the market dictate. Don't try to control everything. And again, it just comes down to leadership. And I am hopeful with our new municipal government, ABC. We saw that with the pace of change vote that really went through. It was very refreshing to see our municipal councillors ask very pointed questions to staff and voted to do away with this pace of change so we can actually get things. This idea of artificially constraining development is just nonsense, and it would have been a disaster. So I'm glad that we were able to move forward. But again, I guess to answer your question, it's leadership.
And artificially constraining development is never good when the supply demand is already out of balance.
That's right.
Yeah, other than short-term NIMBYism, it's every other category, it's a huge loss.
Yeah.
On the list of the buyer profile you've got there, REITs are absent, but everybody kind of knows that they're sidelined right now for a lot of transactions. But what about people looking to create the next multi-generational real estate dynasty or family in a market where you need 50% equity to get into your first purchase and valuations of $800 a door?
Yeah.
It's got to be stymieing them. I couldn't imagine trying to, raise capital and get going unless you just are very well situated in your life and connection-wise to make that happen. So in the last, call it 2 years, have you seen groups like that showing up to the table, trying to get their first, second, third property going? Maybe they've been buying triplexes, things like that, but now they want to get a 20-plex. Yeah. Are they active? Are they out there, or is this just going to consolidate into nothing but established groups owning everything?
Great question again. I would say historically I have not been able to point to one cohort or one demographic or one buyer group where we saw it's actually evenly spread out. We have first-time buyers who are evolving from a 4-plex or 6-plex to maybe a 10-12 suiter. We're seeing groups that have inherited significant amount of money that are going in for the first time. We're seeing large family-based operators that have to keep the machine going. They'll refinance some of their properties and they'll just move forward with another acquisition. And of course, the institutional groups. I would say that the trend that we're seeing coming out of this historic high inflationary, high interest rate environment where liquidity came down, when I start to see some very astute, let's call them the players of Vancouver, who are coming out, who are seeing the opportunity, these groups typically don't need a lot of financing or are not concerned about, they're not sensitive to that. And so those groups come out first and they start purchasing properties, and then the market kind of looks at them and saying, oh, if these guys are buying, then something's up. And so that there's a domino effect where other kind of buyer groups are coming out of the woodwork. And as I showed you on our 35-year trend cycle, a high interest rate environment, some of the highest active markets we've seen are in high interest rate environments. And so the groups that are coming out now we call it smart money. They're coming out, they're less sensitive to mortgage financing. However, in the last few weeks, Bonds have dropped, and 5-year money, I think Cynthia got a quote today, when 3.65 was it for 5-year CMHC insured money. I mean, a few months ago we were at 4.5% for 5-year money, and things were really quiet. I mean, how can you justify buying a building at a 3 cap when you're borrowing at 4.5? We took some of our old legacy listings that have been hanging around, where some of our clients want last year's prices, and there's not much we can do about that. But we got some mortgage summaries, and you'd have to put down 70% just to get a loan. So that just doesn't work.
No, it cuts out a lot of the market.
It certainly does, or all the market.
I'm Toronto based. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in Vancouver, but I'm Toronto based, and I know in some of the submarkets out there, the brokers there have talked about investment activity being down, 90% year over year, which is just staggering. Your numbers are not that dramatic, and maybe you can comment on how that compares to the broader market. But what is everybody outside of Goodman Commercial seeing right now in terms of investment activity, and what do we need to get the Vancouver bonfire raging again?
Yeah, it certainly is a tough market, and you can see when things shift, when a lot of my colleagues and other firms, they're moving firms. There's not a lot of transactions coming out of their brokerages. It's a tough time, and I think it was inevitable that we were going to go through this period where there would be a recalibration, and I think that the majority of the action that we saw was being fueled by really, really cheap money. Obviously, COVID was a catalyst for this. It's ironic that a global pandemic was really good for business. I was working out of my office, Zooming and writing offers and doing deals, and not even able to get into apartment buildings, and still being able to do deals in that environment. And now, a couple years later, we're kind of just going through this hangover right now. Our company, historically, with these tough cycles, tends to do better, and I think it's because we're advocates for the industry, and people look to us as for advice, and we give advice whether or not we're going to be your agent. We try to really write fact-based newsletters that can help people, and by virtue of publishing and writing and advocating, we're able to attract business. And Cynthia, my partner, is probably one of the leading voices in the province as an advocate for industry, and more fact-based. She's an executive board member of the Urban Development Institute, and often helps with policies. And as a result of this outreach, I think we attract many groups to us who have to sell. Now remember, in any tough market, why do people sell? Death, divorce, sickness, estate, conflict. Majority of the time, I feel like a psychologist. Any commercial broker, when they ask, what do you do for your living? Well, I'm a licensed broker, but what do you really do? We solve problems, and we listen to people's stories, and so we're really good at that. We can walk into a room and deal with institutional REITs and cut a deal there, or we can come into someone's home and have a coffee and listen to their story and help them facilitate a sale. So in any market, there must and always will be transactions. People have to get on with their lives, and we're going to be there for them.
I imagine it'd be less so, though, the people just identifying now to be a clean exit from an investment strategy, and more the reasons that you rhymed off driving the sales side of it.
Yes, although those reasons are always there, but I would suggest that the market's actually decent. When you look at the price per door and the cap rates, historically, interest rates are actually not that high. It's just how fast things moved in 1 year, which was unprecedented. It was like people just got sideswiped. But the prices that we're seeing, they're just off from the insanity that we experienced for a couple of years. So it's come down, but the market's still very healthy. So if you bought a building 10, 15, 20 years ago, you're doing okay. You're just not selling at the top of the market. Are we going to see this type of energy come back? Maybe. But if I was a betting man, I would say that we're going to go through a pretty steady market over the next few years. We're not going to see any major downs. We're not going to see any major increases in value. I think it's just going to be steady
bit more
for the
normal.
foreseeable future. Yeah,
A bit more normal.
and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think, and we're going to be seeing a shift in the marketplace, and we're going to see a lot of commercial brokers and maybe other realtors, for that matter, in the residential market moving on because there's just only so much space in the sector.
Yeah, that story is definitely playing out in a few different markets right now. And to your point about interest rates, the recency effect is, it's tough to look at interest rates in 2020 and think about where we are right now, but this isn't 1991. We're not in double-digit interest rates. I mean, the conversation I had with borrowers through 2021, the interest rates were up from 2021 as compared to 2020, where they were the lowest they'd ever been. And they go, wow, but last year's so much better. It's like, well, yeah, but now you're borrowing in the second best year of the last, however long.
That's right.
And, and if you were to stack up 2023 against, the last 40 years of interest rates, we're the bottom half of the middle of the pack.
Well, also it begs the question: would you rather borrow 5-year money at 1.4% and pay $600,000 a unit for an apartment building, or would you rather borrow money at 3.65% and instead of paying $600 a door, pay $420,000 a door? Some very smart real estate people have told me interest rates go up and down, but the cost of the building, your base cost, is always going to be there.
That stays with you.
I don't know the right answer, but everything's relative.
This is the third year in a row we've had Goodman Commercial on. So next year,
yes,
Cynthia will be in your seat. We decided I think we're gonna rotate here.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? The last year when we're sitting here a year from now. What are we talking about that happened over this next year? And as I want to, of course, revisit this and identify what we got wrong and right.
Replay this as an intro to Cynthia's session.
Yeah. I believe that we're going to start seeing some better shifts in our land use policies. I think people are catching on, and I think that narrative is changing. I think because we've seen a shift in power municipally, and with the last vote that we had on the pace of change, it's refreshing. I think that sound minds now are speaking up, and that we're going to start to see some of the challenges and the impositions put on the sector lifted. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to start to see at least the development cycle shrink, because that's one of the major reasons why we don't have affordability. I think that interest rates will stabilize in the new normal, this new interest rate environment. This balanced environment, for lack of better words, will continue for a while. And I think rental rates are going to continue to go up. And that's going to be a challenge for a lot of tenants in our community that can't afford those rents. The last thing that we need is the government intervening and not allowing the free market. I know there's a lot of nonprofit groups out now shopping. We've facilitated a few transactions with nonprofits. We're going to see a lot more nonprofits buying in the market. I would argue that they can compete and participate in the market. They don't need any subsidies, they don't need any help by fiddling with our market in terms of a first right of refusal has been put forth, which I think would be a disaster for the industry for so many reasons. That's a whole separate podcast, so don't get me going. But we're going to see a lot more nonprofits. There's this $500 million fund, which we've written about in the Goodman Report. And also Andrei Pavlov did an op-ed that you can read, arguing that it's probably not the best long-term strategy to help solve our affordability. Essentially, they're taking market rental out of the pool. And so if you are a member of a nonprofit and you happen to be part of that community and they can put you in a home, you're doing well. But that is a very small fraction of the renter community. So for everybody else, the price is going to go up because there's less supply. And so we're going to see that trend. But overall, listen, we're in a great city. People like living here. We have some challenges, but I think long term, we're out of the worst period right now, and I think things will slowly turn back to normal, whatever normal is. But it's not going to be crickets anymore when we launch a listing.
I like the outlook.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to blow too much smoke.
One last prediction before we let you go. top of market rents 1 year from now for like the fanciest of the fanciest, newly to market, just impressive apartment. What are we getting per square foot?
We're over $6.
Over $6. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
and I fully believe that number.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Okay, well that's a fun one to fact check a year from now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening with Donald Trump? Is he in handcuffs? Because
I not checked. Well, where's Donald Trump a year from now? There'd be a funny prediction.
I better be careful what I say.
All right, I guess we're ending on a weird note today. Mark, thanks again for the repeat visit, and we look forward to having you back on. Rolly, thanks for putting together this fantastic conference, and of course for stepping in to co-host for Aaron. And for anybody worried about Aaron's welfare, don't worry, he is coming back. He will be on the podcast. He could not get onto a plane to Vancouver for this trip, unfortunately, but we've not parted ways or anything.
Okay.
So that is it. I want to thank First National for powering the podcast, of course. And once again, to our guest, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great.